The emergency klaxons aboard Luna Station pierced through the diplomatic ceremonies like the screams of dying worlds. Admiral Chin's calm professionalism cracked for just a moment as she received the incoming transmission, her face going pale despite years of military training. "What's the situation?" Zethkar demanded, his warrior instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. 3 days of interaction with humans had not diminished his ability to recognize mortal danger. "Long-range sensors are detecting a Vorthan invasion fleet," Admiral Chun announced to the gathered delegates. 200 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. They're 12 hours out and broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. The diplomatic chamber fell silent except for the quiet clicking of Cathara mandibles, their equivalent of nervous laughter. Zethkar felt a familiar surge of anticipation mixed with resignation. The Vorthan were the terror of this galaxy's outer rim, a species that made the Cathara look gentle by comparison. They consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty worlds in their wake. "Your fleet is impressive," Zethkar said to Admiral Chun, "but the Vorthan have conquered 43 star systems. Their smallest vessel masses more than your largest battleship. I have seen entire Cathara battle groups destroyed by a single Vorthan squadron." Ambassador Maria Santos, the lead human diplomatic representative, stood calmly despite the chaos around them. "Admiral, what's our current defensive capability?" 78 vessels of various classes," Chun replied grimly. "Most are colony ships and transports. We have perhaps 20 actual warships in the immediate area." The mathematics were simple and brutal. Even if every human ship was a match for Cathara vessels, which had already proven superior to anything the Supremacy could field, they would still be facing 10-to-1 odds against an enemy that specialized in overwhelming force. "I recommend immediate evacuation," Zethkar said, surprised by his own concern for human survival. "The Vorthan do not take prisoners. They will consume every living being in this system." But instead of panic, the humans began implementing what they called Protocol 7. Zethkar watched in amazement as families calmly gathered emergency supplies while children were loaded onto the fastest ships available. There was no shoving, no abandonment of the weak, no desperate scrambling for escape. "Where will you retreat to?" he asked Admiral Chun. "Retreat?" Chun looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Ambassador, we're not retreating. We're implementing defensive positions." Dr. Park appeared beside them, having been summoned from the medical bay where he had been treating injured Cathara crew members. "Admiral, the civilian evacuation is complete. All non-essential personnel are aboard the colony ships and ready for emergency departure." "Non-essential?" Zethkar repeated. "Your young and your breeders?" "Our children and their guardians," Dr. Park corrected gently. "They're the most essential people in human civilization. That's why they're being taken to safety while the rest of us handle this situation." The concept struck Zethkar like a physical blow. On Skarthak, the strongest warriors would claim the fastest ships, leaving the weak to face destruction. The idea of warriors deliberately remaining behind to protect those they considered most essential was alien beyond comprehension. "Admiral." Chun was coordinating with fleet commanders across the system, as Zethkar could see human ships taking positions that made no tactical sense. Instead of massing their forces for maximum firepower, they were spreading out in a defensive shell around the evacuation routes. "This is suicide," Vextra observed, having joined the discussion after monitoring human fleet movements. "They are deliberately sacrificing tactical advantage to protect non-combatants." "Yes," Dr. Park agreed simply. "That's what we do." The first Vorthan ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge, their black hulls bristling with weapons designed to crack planetary crusts. Even at extreme range, their presence made space itself seem darker, as if light fled from their approach. Zethkar had faced the Vorthan once before, when they had consumed the Cathara colony at Treshanal. He had been part of a rescue mission that arrived too late to find anything but empty cities and scattered bones. The experience had taught him that some enemies could not be fought, only fled from. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, We're receiving a transmission from the Vorthan Fleet Commander. The main display activated, showing a creature that represented every civilization's worst nightmare. The Vorthan stood 9 feet tall on insectoid legs, its multiple arms ending in weapons that seemed to be surgically grafted to its anatomy. Acid dripped from its mandibles, while its compound eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. I am War Prime Skethmal of the Vorthan. Consumption Fleet, the creature announced in a voice like grinding metal. This system will be harvested. Surrender now, and your death will be swift. Resist, and we will consume you slowly while you watch your offspring become sustenance. Admiral Chun stepped forward, her small human frame dwarfed by the image of the Vorthan war machine. War Prime Skethmal, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet. This system is under human protection. We respectfully request that you withdraw your forces. The Vorthan's laughter was like the sound of breaking bones. Human? We have never heard of this species. You will make interesting study before consumption. Prepare to be harvested. The transmission ended, leaving the diplomatic chamber in tense silence. Zethkar felt the familiar weight of inevitable defeat settling over him like a burial shroud. The Vorthan did not negotiate, did not retreat, and had never been defeated in recorded galactic history. Admiral, he said formally, I request permission to join your defensive fleet. The Kithara have a debt of honor to your people. Chun looked surprised. Commander, your ship is heavily damaged and your crew is still recovering from injuries. We couldn't ask you to. You are not asking, Zethkar interrupted. I am volunteering. My warriors understand death in battle. What we do not understand is allowing worthy opponents to face destruction alone. What happened next would be debated by xenopsychologists for centuries to come. Admiral Chen, facing the annihilation of her species, smiled at the offer of aid from a former enemy. The expression somehow made her more intimidating than any Kithara battle roar or Vorthan threat. Thank you, Commander. Signal your ships to take position in the second defensive line. But I need you to understand something first. We're not planning to die here today. The human fleet moved with precision that seemed impossible under the circumstances. Small ships darted between larger vessels, deploying something the humans called gravitational mines at specific coordinates. Colony ships that should have been fleeing instead took positions behind the larger warships, their massive hulls serving as mobile shields. What is your battle plan? Zethkar asked, studying human fleet positions that appeared to violate every principle of military tactics. We're going to do something the Vorthan have never encountered before, Admiral Chun replied. We're going to make them choose between victory and survival. As the Vorthan fleet approached, their formation was exactly what Zethkar expected, overwhelming force concentrated for maximum destructive impact. They had learned through 1,000 conquests that civilizations would break when faced with certain annihilation, but the humans did not break. When the first Vorthan dreadnought entered weapons range, the entire human fleet opened fire simultaneously. The coordinated volley was precisely targeted, not at the massive warship's armor or weapons, but at its engines and navigation systems. The Vorthan ship found itself suddenly dead in space, unable to maneuver but still capable of fighting. This should have been a minor inconvenience for a vessel designed to destroy planets. Then the human colony ships began their approach. What are they doing? Vextra asked in horror. Those are civilian vessels. They're ramming the dreadnought? Dr. Park said calmly, as if discussing weather patterns. Each colony ship contains approximately 50,000 volunteers who decided they would rather die fighting than see their children consumed. Zethkar watched in stunned silence as the first colony ship, New Hope, accelerated toward the disabled Vorthan dreadnought. Its hull had been reinforced with every piece of spare armor available, and its holds were packed with every explosive device the human fleet could provide. The Vorthan tried to stop the approaching ship with defensive fire, but the human escort vessels had positioned themselves to absorb the incoming attacks. Smaller ships threw themselves into the path of plasma bolts meant for the colony vessel, sacrificing themselves to ensure the New Hope reached its target. The explosion when the colony ship struck the dreadnought was visible across the entire system. When the energy discharge faded, both vessels were gone, leaving only expanding clouds of superheated debris. War Prime Skethmal's voice echoed across all frequencies, no longer confident but filled with rage and confusion. Impossible! Civilian vessels do not conduct kamikaze attacks. You sacrifice your own people for military advantage. Admiral Chun's response was broadcast to every ship in both fleets. No, War Prime. We sacrifice ourselves for our people. There is a difference you will never understand. The second Vorthan dreadnought had learned from the first destruction and was maintaining distance, while attempting to coordinate with its. The medical bay aboard the human vessel Resilience was nothing like what Zethkar had expected. Instead of the sterile, mechanical environment typical of Kithara ships, this space felt almost organic. Soft lighting eliminated harsh shadows, and the walls curved in gentle arcs rather than meeting at sharp angles. Most disturbing to his warrior sensibilities, there were no weapons visible anywhere. Dr. James Park approached Zethkar's medical pod with the same calm demeanor he had shown since the Kithara delegation had been brought aboard. The human was small by galactic standards, barely reaching Zethkar's shoulder even when the commander was sitting. Yet something about his presence commanded respect in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. "How are you feeling, Commander?" Dr. Park asked, checking readings on a device that somehow monitored Kithara physiology despite being designed for an entirely different species. "I do not understand," Zethkar said for the 100th time since his capture. "Why do you heal your enemies?" Dr. Park paused in his examination, considering the question with the same seriousness he had shown every aspect of Kithara biology. "Because you're not our enemy," he said simply. "You're injured beings who needed help. That's all that matters to me as a physician." 3 days had passed since the surrender, and Zethkar still struggled to understand human behavior. Instead of the torture and interrogation he had expected, the humans had immediately provided medical care to wounded Kithara crew members. Instead of execution or enslavement, they had offered what they called diplomatic immunity and arranged for formal first contact protocols. "Your species is weak," Zethkar stated, though the words carried less conviction than they had initially. "On Skarthek, the wounded are left to die or recover on their own. It makes us stronger." Dr. Park nodded thoughtfully. "I've been reading the preliminary reports about your homeworld. Gravity 4 times standard, acidic atmosphere, predators that would be classified as weapons of mass destruction on most civilized worlds. Remarkable that any species could evolve there, much less develop space travel. We are the ultimate survivors," Zethkar said with reflexive pride. "We have conquered 17 star systems because we are forged by the most brutal world in the galaxy." "Brutal, yes," Dr. Park agreed. "But I'm curious about something. In all our scans of your ship, we didn't find any entertainment systems, art galleries, or recreational facilities. Your vessel appears to be purely functional: weapons, engines, life support, and basic crew quarters. Is that standard for your people?" The question caught Zethkar off guard. "Entertainment? Art? These are frivolous concepts. A warrior needs only weapons and purpose." Dr. Park made notes on his device, then looked up with genuine curiosity. "Would you like to see something? I think it might interest you." Before Zethkar could object, the walls of the medical bay shimmered and transformed into transparent barriers. Beyond them, the Resilience revealed itself to be far larger and more complex than any warship the Kithara had ever constructed. Gardens flourished under artificial sunlight, tended by crew members who worked alongside complex robotic systems. A school was in session nearby, where human children learned mathematics while their parents served aboard the vessel. An art studio showcased paintings and sculptures created during the voyage, while a gymnasium echoed with the sounds of recreational competition. "This is a colony ship," Dr. Park explained. "We're on our way to establish humanity's 10th interstellar settlement. Everyone aboard this vessel is a volunteer, leaving behind everything they know to build something new." Zethkar stared at the scenes in amazement. They bring their offspring into space? Into danger? Children are our future, Dr. Park said simply. Where we go, they go. And yes, space is dangerous, but so was staying on Earth for our ancestors. Humans have always been explorers, pushing beyond safe boundaries to discover what lies beyond. A group of human children ran past the medical bay's observation window, laughing as they chased each other through corridors that had been designed with their safety in mind. Zethkar watched them with growing confusion. Your young are not trained for combat, he observed. Combat training comes later, if they choose it, Dr. Park replied. First, they learn to think, to create, to understand the universe around them. Some will become artists, others scientists, others engineers. A few might become soldiers, but that's just one path among many. The concept was alien to Cathara thinking. On Skarthek, young were trained to fight from the moment they could walk. Those who showed weakness were abandoned to the predators. Only the strongest survived to adulthood, creating a species of perfect warriors. Admiral Chun's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, announcing that they were approaching Luna Station for the formal first contact ceremonies. Through the transparent walls, Zethkar could see human vessels taking up escort positions around the Resilience. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about military formations. The human ships moved with the same precision they had demonstrated in combat, but their positioning spoke of protection rather than aggression. They were shielding the colony ship and its precious cargo of families from any possible threat. Admiral Chun has children aboard her flagship as well, Dr. Park mentioned casually. Her daughter is studying xenobiology, hoping to become part of future first contact teams. She's particularly excited about the opportunity to study Cathara biology. A warrior's offspring studies the enemy? Zethkar asked in disbelief. She studies life, Dr. Park corrected gently. Her goal is understanding, not conquest. That's what makes us strong as a species, not our ability to destroy, but our desire to learn. Through the observation windows, Luna Station grew visible in the distance. It was massive beyond anything in Cathara space, but its design emphasized beauty alongside functionality. Curved docking arms reached out like welcoming embraces, while gardens and recreational areas were visible through transparent sections of the hull. How many warriors defend this station? Zethkar found himself asking. Defense force numbers are classified, Dr. Park replied diplomatically, but most of the people here are civilians. Scientists, engineers, artists, families. They're here because they chose to be, not because they were forced into service. A Cathara station of similar size would house 1 million warriors and their support staff. Every decision would be made through military hierarchy, every action serving the goal of expansion and conquest. The idea that a space station could function, primarily as a center for peaceful activities, was incomprehensible. Dr. Park's communication device chimed softly. Excuse me, Commander. I need to prepare for the formal ceremonies, but I wanted to give you something first. He handed Zethkar a small device with a simple display. This contains everything we've learned about your homeworld from our observations and your ship's database. I thought you might find our analysis interesting. Left alone in the medical bay, Zethkar activated the device and began reading. The human analysis of Skarthek was thorough beyond anything his own scientists had ever produced. They had identified patterns in the planetary ecosystem that explained how the Cathara had developed their specific adaptations, but it was the conclusions that shocked him most, according to human analysis. Skarthek was not a natural death world. The extreme conditions were the result of ancient terraforming gone wrong, combined with atmospheric manipulation by an extinct civilization. The planet that had forged the Cathara into ultimate warriors was actually an artificial construct, designed by a species that had died out millions of years ago. Even more startling was the comparison data. Earth, according to the human measurements, was actually more naturally dangerous than Skarthek. The humans had simply learned to work with their environment rather than being shaped by it. They had turned their world's dangers into advantages through cooperation, technology, and what they called stubborn optimism. The report included detailed analysis of human evolution, showing how their species had developed from persistence hunters, who could outlast much larger predators through endurance and teamwork. They had survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinctions not through superior strength, but through adaptability and mutual support. Zethkar read about human conflicts. Throughout their history, wars that made Cathara conquests seem small in comparison. Yet instead of glorifying combat, humans seemed to view their violent past as something to be learned from and overcome. Their greatest heroes were often those who had ended wars rather than won them. As the Resilience docked with Luna Station, Zethkar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. The humans were not just another species to be conquered or dismissed. They represented an entirely different approach to survival and strength. The Cathara had become ultimate warriors by being shaped by their environment. Humans had become something else entirely by shaping their environment to match their needs. They carried their families into space not because they had no choice, but because they refused to leave anyone behind. Through the medical bay's windows, Zethkar could see human children pressing their faces against observation ports, staring in wonder at the Cathara delegation. Instead of fear, their expressions showed curiosity and excitement. They were looking at beings who had come to conquer their. The Cathara had ruled the galaxy's outer rim for 3,000 years, and for good reason. Their homeworld of Skarthak was a nightmare that would break lesser species within hours. Gravity pulled at nearly 4 times galactic standard, crushing anything not built to withstand it. The atmosphere burned with acidic compounds that could dissolve most metals. Predators the size of starships hunted across continents of volcanic glass, while storms raged with winds that could strip flesh from bone. Yet the Cathara thrived there. Standing 8 feet tall on powerful legs, their chitinous exoskeletons gleamed black as space itself. 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws could tear through steel plating. Their compound eyes could track dozens of targets simultaneously, while their mandibles could bite through starship hull material. Every Cathara was a living weapon, forged by their brutal world into the perfect killing machine. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the battlecruiser, Bone Render, watching the blue-white star grow larger on the display. Intelligence reports indicated a new species had emerged in this system, calling themselves humans. The reports were laughably primitive. These creatures came from a world they called Earth, which sounded pathetically weak compared to Skarthak. Commander, his tactical officer Vextra, clicked through her mandibles. We're receiving a transmission from the 3rd planet. Audio only, no visual? Let me hear what these soft creatures have to say, Zethkar commanded. His forearms crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of Cathara authority. Static filled the bridge before a strange, melodious voice emerged from the speakers. The universal translator struggled for a moment before rendering the alien words into their language. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet. You have entered Earth's solar system without authorization. Please state your intentions and prepare to be escorted to the designated first contact zone near Luna Station. The bridge fell silent except for the low clicking that passed for Cathara laughter. The idea that these humans would dare give orders to a Cathara battlecruiser was amusing beyond measure. Open a channel, Zethkar ordered. When the communication light activated, he spoke in his most intimidating tone. I am Commander Zethkar of the Cathara Supremacy. Your pathetic species will surrender immediately and prepare to be evaluated for slavery or extinction. Resistance will only increase your suffering. The response came after a few seconds of silence. Commander Zethkar, I'm afraid that's not going to happen. Earth is under the protection of the Terran Defense Fleet, and we don't take kindly to threats. I'm going to ask you one more time to state peaceful intentions and allow our escort vessels to guide you to the proper diplomatic channels. Vextra's claws clicked against her console in agitation. Commander, their scans show no significant military presence. A few primitive orbital platforms and what appears to be a small fleet of vessels that barely qualify as warships. Their largest ship mass is less than half of our smallest destroyer. Zethkar felt his blood surge with anticipation. Another easy conquest for the supremacy. These humans clearly had no idea what they were facing. The Kithara had conquered 17 species in the past century alone, and all had been more advanced than these primitives appeared to be. "Charge weapons," he commanded. "Target their largest orbital platform. We'll show them the futility of resistance." As the Bone Render's massive plasma cannons powered up, Zethkar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Kithara were the ultimate deathworlders, survivors of the most brutal planet known to galactic civilization. These soft humans from their gentle world would learn that lesson quickly. "Commander," the sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting movement from their fleet. 3 vessels are breaking away from the main group and heading in our direction." Zethkar studied the tactical display. The approaching ships were small, barely the size of Kithara fighters, but they moved with surprising coordination. "Probably coming to surrender formally," he mused. "Hold fire until they're in optimal range. I want to see the fear in their optical sensors when we destroy them." The 3 human vessels approached steadily, their course taking them into a standard intercept pattern. When they reached weapons range, Zethkar expected them to stop and transmit surrender terms. Instead, they did something completely unexpected. They opened fire. The bridge shook as multiple impacts struck the Bone Render's shields. Warning lights flashed as energy readings spiked across the defensive grid. "Impossible," Vextra hissed. "Those ships are too small to carry weapons capable of affecting our shields." But the tactical display told a different story. The human vessels had somehow managed to penetrate their primary defensive grid with weapons that should have been completely ineffective. More concerning, they were moving in patterns that made no tactical sense yet, somehow avoided every return shot from the battlecruiser's automated defense systems, evasive maneuvers. Zethkar commanded, his earlier confidence beginning to crack. "All batteries, focus fire on the lead vessel." The Bone Render turned its massive bulk to bring its primary weapons to bear, but the human ships seemed to anticipate every move. They danced between the plasma bolts with an agility that defied logic, their formation never breaking. Despite the overwhelming firepower directed at them, then one of the human vessels did something that made Zethkar's compound eyes widen in disbelief. Instead of continuing to maneuver at a safe distance, it accelerated directly toward the battlecruiser's hull. "It's conducting a ramming attack," the sensor operator called out. "Impact in 30 seconds. All point defense. Concentrate on that ship." Zethkar roared. Dozens of smaller weapons swiveled to track the incoming human vessel, filling space with energy bursts. But the ship weaved through the defensive fire like it was navigating an asteroid field instead of a deadly crossfire. At the last possible second, it changed course slightly. Racing along the battlecruiser's hull instead of crashing into it, explosions bloomed across the Bone Render's armored surface as the human ship delivered its payload at point-blank range. Damage alerts screamed across the bridge displays as secondary systems failed throughout the ship. "Report?" Zethkar demanded. "Main engines offline," Vextra announced, her voice tight with something the Cathara rarely experienced, fear. "Weapons grid down to 60% efficiency." "They targeted our propulsion system specifically, Commander." This was surgical, not random. The other 2 human vessels had used the distraction to close distance as well, adding their own precise strikes to critical systems. Within minutes, the pride of the Cathara fleet had been reduced to a drifting hulk. Its weapons largely disabled and its engines completely destroyed. The communication system crackled to life again, and Admiral Chain's voice filled the bridge. "Commander Zethkar, this is your final warning. Surrender now and prepare to be boarded, or we'll be forced to target your life support systems next." Zethkar stared at the tactical display in shock. 3 tiny human vessels had disabled his battlecruiser in less than 10 minutes of combat. It was impossible. The Kithara were the ultimate warriors, survivors of the galaxy's most deadly world. They had conquered every species they had encountered through superior strength, endurance, and ruthlessness, yet these humans had outfought them using ships a fraction the size of Kithara vessels, with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their shields. employing tactics that made no sense according to every military doctrine the Kithara had ever studied. "Commander," the communications officer reported, "I'm detecting massive movement throughout their system. It appears their entire fleet is mobilizing. Sensors indicate over 200 vessels of various configurations." 200 ships? Zethkar repeated numbly. The initial intelligence reports had suggested a primitive civilization with limited spaceflight capability. The reality was proving very different. Admiral Chun's voice returned to the speakers. "Commander, I'm reading massive stress on your ship's hull. I strongly advise immediate surrender to prevent catastrophic decompression. My people are standing by to provide emergency assistance if needed." The offer of aid from an enemy struck Zethkar as completely alien. In Kithara culture, weakness was exploited, never assisted. The strong dominated the weak, that was the natural order. Yet these humans had demonstrated overwhelming tactical superiority and were now offering to help preserve Kithara lives. "Sir," Vextra said quietly, "hull integrity is dropping rapidly. We have multiple breaches on decks 12 through 16. Through the viewports, Zethkar could see human vessels surrounding the disabled battlecruiser. They maintained perfect formation, weapons powered but not actively targeting. It was a display of controlled strength that spoke of discipline and training far beyond what any primitive species should possess, for the first time in his military career. Commander Zethkar found himself considering surrender. The Kithara were the ultimate deathworlders, forged by a world that killed the weak and made the strong into living weapons. They had never met another species that could match them in combat, but these humans had done more than match them. They had made Kithara military doctrine look clumsy and outdated. 3 small ships had disabled a battlecruiser designed to conquer worlds, and they had done it with a precision that suggested complete